Let's go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, world.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Good evening.
It is,
Hola.
at least here in Chennai, India, it's a little after 7 at night on Tuesday, February 6, 2018. And we are gathered to have a discussion about the storytelling revival in the world today, and also the topic of the Storytelling Festival in Chennai, which is going on right now. The topic is storytelling for teaching, training, and healing, ways of activating the listener. So the idea that we're trying to communicate in this festival is that we're trying to use storytelling to activate ourselves and others. And the proverb that comes to mind in relation to this title, to me, is that one can take a horse to water, but one cannot make the horse drink. Sometimes the horse refuses to activate, maybe for good reason. But so now the first step seems to be that we should introduce ourselves. And I will introduce myself last. Catherine, would you introduce yourself first?
Catherine Fairley from Northern California.
But we're together in Chennai. There's no trick photography here. We're both here in Chennai. So everyone, please, when you introduce yourself, do mention where you are.
Sure.
Go ahead. I don't know if you're all seeing the same configuration. Let's try to go clockwise. Shuli, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I will. So my name is Shuli, and I'm from Bengal, West Bengal, which is a state in the east of India. And I have been telling stories informally, but recently I have taken to storytelling formally, and that is how I met Eric. And it's gonna be interesting session, I believe, which is why I opted for it.
Wonderful.
That's all.
And yes, it's wonderful that you took the extra step of saying a few words about your relationship with storytelling. Let's each one of us do that. So Tim, would you speak next?
Yeah, okay. I'm Tim Shepherd, and I live in the southwest of England in a city called Bristol. I've been involved in storytelling for quite a number of years, and I started off by teaching and spreading storytelling in my hometown, formed a storytelling company. I created the storytelling FAQ on the internet. That was the first resource for storytellers to find out more about it. And yes, I've just been very involved in it ever since. That was back in 1990, I think, my first sort of involvement. And now I also, as well as training storytellers, I train entrepreneurs who've got a real purpose, a sort of social purpose to their business, to help them spread their story as well, so that people benefit from their good work in the world. But yes, I'm sort of very involved in all aspects of storytelling here, and hope to say some of that.
Wonderful, thank you. Ronnie?
Yeah. Hi, this is Ronnie. I'm from Patna. It's in the province of Bihar. I'm a professional design thinker and a management consultant. For the last 20 years, I had been practicing working with the corporate and the academics. Since 2014, that's 3 years ago, me and my wife, she's a painter, we started off with storytelling, initially for the children. But now our storytelling has emerged into and evolved into taking it up to the levels of social engineering and development initiatives. We have a formal outfit called Kahani Ghar, which means story room, Kahani Ghar, in Patna. And I think in due course of our conversation, we will get to know each other much more better. Do you hear me?
Yes,
we do.
Yes.
wonderful. Sonia?
Hello, this is Sonia Carmona from Spain, from the south of Spain. I live in Sevilla, even though I'm from Granada. I don't know if you know these two cities. I am a storyteller since 1998. I come from the theater world. I studied theater in the US and theater directing here in Spain. And although I mostly do performance storytelling, I'm also really interested in applied storytelling, especially to education. That's it.
Wonderful. Aparna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Aparna. I'm in Bangalore. Bangalore is in the south of India. I love stories. I am a storyteller and a story listener. I use storytelling in everything I do. I work in storytelling in education, storytelling in business, storytelling with my children on their bed, storytelling for breakfast, storytelling for lunch, storytelling for dinner. So I do stories all the time. I'm happy to be here, and it's really good to be, with all you guys. You guys are fabulous from all over the world. I'm really, really intrigued with, with your world and your storytelling. I'm also a part of Bangalore Storytelling Society. We have a collective in Bangalore, and we do wonderful things on the public platform. So that's me. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Aparna.
Thank you. Krishna?
Hello, I'm Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Krishna. I'm a preschool educator, and I've been introduced to storytelling while I was searching for some active engagement for my child, my own child. And that's how I got in touch with Eric. And then we had done a little storytelling certification with Eric. And then from then, I have been coming to CSF almost from every year from 2014. And it's great meeting all of you here. I'm looking forward to learn more from you all.
Thank you. Radha?
Good evening. I'm Radha. I'm a teacher. I work with the primary students. I'm from Mysore. Storytelling has always been a passion, and I've enjoyed listening to stories. And now when I get an opportunity to narrate some, I would like to do it the best possible way. That's the reason I signed up for this program, to learn a lot from all of you who've already been doing it for a while now. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you. Samya?
Hi, I'm Saumya from Bangalore, and very, very happy to meet all of you, especially Tim, whose page and website I've followed for years together, and really it's like my go-to. So thank you so much for connecting and creating this platform, Eric. I've been interested in stories and storytelling from 1998. But currently, I'm also very interested in how stories change us. And so in that journey, I've worked with Eric in story therapy. So I'm very happy to be one of the first students of Eric in storytelling therapy. And I'm also part of Bangalore Storytelling Society, and very, very happy to have storytelling rise up and shine so much in the world today.
And Regina.
And Regina. So hi, everybody. Regina. I'm in New York City at the moment, though I bounce around a great deal. But my base has been here for almost 50 years. I was doing theater, and then I discovered storytelling, and I've been doing it professionally since 1990. Platform storytelling, I say I've been everywhere from Broadway to Brazil, and from homeless shelters and prisons to the White House. So I kind of had this wild career. I've done a lot of storytelling in the schools as a teaching artist. I began doing work with women in prisons, and I teach at NYU. I teach applied storytelling. I'm an ESL teacher, so I have one class that I teach specifically using storytelling to teach language, and another class for the program in educational theater where I get a range of students applied storytelling across all the spectrum,
They read essays about storytelling with victims of torture and storytelling and, you know, all these wonderful places that we have found ourselves in this revival. And I also produce a series for NYU of professional storytelling. Ana Garcia Castellano was here. I don't know if you know her, but she was here telling Don Quixote some years ago. She's a buddy of mine at the festival. So my series, and I really I try to focus on traditional storytelling, but we wander into personal historical story, and this fall it was all political just because of the nature of the world at the moment. And I called the series Just Cause I Could Do It, and Just Cause. And we looked at things. This spring we're going into and the thing about storytelling is we can come directly or we can come indirectly. So we're going into the heart of the matter, boundless love, but it's also, you know, it's applied storytelling, but we'll be looking at it that way.
Wonderful. And I
was so happy to be in the Chennai Festival last year.
We were delighted. And I'm Eric Millard of New York City. And you all know you can take the boy out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the boy. So I'm a native New Yorker, but I'm sitting in Chennai. And I've been involved in theater and storytelling for over 40 years. Okay, so let's begin with the state of the revival. Recently, I think the U.S. government had they did their annual State of the Union address. So let's give our state of the revival, the state of the storytelling revival discussion. I've been lately speaking about the storytelling revival to people here in India, and this is what I've said. So please give me feedback on this and add to it. That it seems the revival began in the West. The West means what? The USA and Europe and the UK. Someone is objecting, some spirit is objecting to what I'm saying. But if there is any sound, if there is sound issues, it might be a good idea if you, okay, I'm gonna suggest it. Put yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Everyone, please do that. To put yourself on mute, sounds like a flood. The mute cursor is on the upper right of your little window. So so good. Put yourself on mute, and so here we are. Okay, so I've been saying the storytelling revival, it seems, began in the 1960s in the USA and the UK, Europe, perhaps Australia also. And I've been saying it was, in the sense, a reaction against the sudden influx and appearance of colored television. At least in my home, when I was a boy, in 1968, suddenly everyone had a color television in their own room. And so you could just stay in your room and be transfixed, amazed by the beautiful colors. But some people said, no, we're getting cut off from each other, we're getting cut off from nature, we're getting cut off from human contact. We've got to bring back storytelling in the sense of humans being together. So it seems that's one way the revival began. And that was what, the 1960s? That's almost 50 years ago. In places like India, it seems it's only come into full bloom recently. Geeta Ramanujam has been working here for over 20 years in Bangalore. Jiva Raghunath, she's our first lady of storytelling in Tamil Nadu, performing and training in English and Tamil, working on maybe 15 years. But only, it seems there's a need for the revival and for professional storytelling, especially when extended families dwindle. And so there's the grandmothers and grandfathers are not at home to tell stories to the children, so professionals are needed. That's a part of it. So it's blooming here in India, it seems. India has a great storytelling culture relating to the epics, the Panchatantra stories. So businesses understand that they can use story work as part of soft skills and life skills training. And myself and others are developing storytelling in relation to healing. Everyone knows about storytelling in relation to education. So it seems it's coming along very nicely here in India. Would anyone add to that about India, or Sonia, or Tim, or Gina? Would you say anything about storytelling in your locations? Everyone go ahead. But probably you don't want to all go ahead at the same time, but we will negotiate. The thing about conversation is that it's often very messy. We often step on each other's lines, and then we back off and apologize. That's called conversation repair. So let's have a lot of conversation and a lot of conversation repair. Go ahead. Somebody.
Eric, you can actually raise your hand. You can go to participants and you can raise your hand. So you will have a view of all the people who've raised their hands.
Well, we can just
do it
in a low-tech way. Just if you want to speak, just raise your physical hand. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I wanted to add to what you were saying is that when it comes to India, I can speak for India. I think what happened a very long time in ancient times was when storytelling was used beyond entertainment. It was used for education in the gurukuls in the ancient times. But somewhere in between, and that's pretty much it. It was used for education, as an applied format. But over the past decades, I think storytelling has really seen a rise in all kinds of format, including formal healing and therapy and education, especially in STEM education, for example, and business, of course. Business itself is probably, this format of business is new in India, but applied storytelling is something which is seeing an upswing. And in the recent past, what is reviving is the ancient traditional format. Contemporary storytelling is coming up in the recent past, and its applied format is also in its nascent stages.
But I think when many people who are reviving and developing traditional forms are still changing it. Because, for example, in Tamil Nadu, a traditional form of worship is Sami, known in English as spirit possession. And what happens is sometimes people tell or sing the story of a local hero or of a local divine figure, and then it is felt that the spirit of that character comes into the body and speaks. So this is a form of worship, and it's not really something that belongs on a concert stage. So that sort of devotional ritual storytelling, it's still very much going on. In those cases, the act of narration is an act of invocation, but that is not part of the storytelling revival, unless we theatricalize it and put it on a stage, with the full discussion and full blessings of everyone involved. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to or object to?
Eric, Regina, I'm just wondering, Catherine's sitting there so quietly and listening. Catherine, do you want to talk about storytelling in the U.S.?
Well, we started reviving it in Jonesboro, Tennessee. That was in the 1970s. And it was about a particular performance that happened annually, and then it started being a membership group as well. And then it split up, and it has just this last couple of years moved to Kansas City, Mostly they moved it because they wanted it to be something that people from East and West could get there easier and join. So that's where we've been having a conference annually. A lot of changes going on, and it's really hard to say where it's going. What do you think, Regina?
It's going everywhere. There's this enormous upsurge of personal storytelling here in the States. I'm not sure about around the world, but that's become so popular that the traditional tellers have been trying to figure out how to stay, I don't want to say relevant, because I think we are relevant at all times, and we are the roots of all that, but how to stay alive with this. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens of personal storytelling venues to every one of traditional, and a lot of us traditional tellers are incorporating. I'm doing a show this weekend that's got both, but I am doing traditional stories, but I'm weaving some personal in because it's expected at this point. So that's another piece of it. Jonesboro is still attracting lots of people, and there are dozens of festivals. What's exciting to me in the U.S. right now are the number of festivals, because when I first started and discovered storytelling back around 1990, there was Jonesboro, and then there were a couple other things, and now suddenly there's just festivals everywhere, and I think that's a sign of great health, both that people want to tell and that people want to come and listen. And it's being used, applied storytelling in business. It's like a buzzword. It's become everything now is storytelling. So it's kind of been interesting to watch the evolution. It's been discovered for better or for worse. I'll leave it at that.
And the younger generation has been going towards the personal story things, and only very recently have elders started getting involved with it, and they've been sucking the young people into traditional stories as well. So we are beginning to blend both of them. It's no longer this age, that age. We're all beginning to tolerate, enjoy each other's interests.
At the national storytelling conferences, I know at least a couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk that there are too many of us old people and not enough young people. Is that changing?
Well, there is this discussion, and there is this kind of, I don't want to say it's a split, but we haven't figured out how to blend it really gracefully yet, I don't think, except certain places, certain times. I'm doing a show, I'll be in a show in March, and there'll be, I'm definitely elder, then there'll be a kind of middle lady, she's from Argentina, and we've got a young, incredible storyteller who is, he just turned 30, and he was she a few years ago. So we are blending the whole thing.
I feel it's very important to make the distinction between story and storytelling. Story is going strong and always has and always will, because that is related to cinema, television, entertainment, marketing, advertising, politics. Story is a big part of the human experience, but storytelling is the art form and conversation form of using primarily the voice and the body, and whether performance, conversational, ritual. It's a social in a social gathering, and it's up for debate whether one can do storytelling, or if one tries to do storytelling by audio or video conference, what is one doing? It's different from storytelling with people who are physically present to each other. But what I'm saying is that, for example, Tim, I understand, I hear that you're doing deep story work with a lot of your clients, but I'm sure many of them are not performing necessarily, but it's going into their print or their websites or other media. Do you feel it's in your experience and with your clients, is it an important distinction whether they're telling the stories with their voice and body or they're communicating the story in some other way?
Well, that is really at the heart of what I try to do. I try to turn people into storytellers rather than give them a kind of business technique or add in a little storytelling to what they're doing. I try to actually give them the experience of what it's like to have the mindset and the values and the way of being with people that a storyteller has. So I think that's what's the most valuable thing. That brings people together. It makes people more human, makes them respectful when they're interchanging with each other. And that doesn't always happen in business. So for that reason, I prefer to work with people who are in small businesses, who are really driven by purpose, a sense of a cause. And those people tend to have some personal skin in the game, as they say, some idea of a purpose and a passion about what they do. And they deserve to get their message out. And, you know, I try to help them see how it's not about having a story that they stick on a website. I don't do that. I help them actually find their storytelling voice. Of course, they don't want to become storytellers. they want to just become successful in what they're doing. But they start to realize, actually, it's part of being human. And that's very much what I believe, that storytelling is really the fulfillment of being human, of just being able to be with people honestly and openly and share the best of what we have to give. Some wisdom, some tales are full of wisdom, of course, and the best tales are full of a lot of it. But it's about sort of putting down the person and the need to kind of be me, and simply help other people understand. But very nicely, that is the way that business is going now, that there is much more understanding, not only that storytelling is some kind of a sort of a hot new thing, but that business needs to communicate and respect people and not just shout at them all the time. So, you know, it really has been changing. And there is a certain segment of business which is hugely growing called social entrepreneurship, which is all about solving the problems of society while making a profit, rather than making a profit and giving a few pence to charity, you know. And the social entrepreneurship is hugely growing. I've read recently that a survey in the UK said that over 50% of all new businesses here consider themselves to be social enterprises. They're not, you know, necessarily by some technical definition, but that's how they see themselves. So it is important. People are realizing in the world today that we need to come together more. And what is better at that than storytelling? So I think it's growing strong.
So you're very much involved with the storytelling process as a social event, not just stories.
Yeah. I suppose my speciality, I'll give you a little tiny bit of background. I grew up extremely shy, very inadequate at communicating. I felt very self-conscious, and as a result, I was quite isolated. I then joined the circus, as you do. And well, I joined a circus school, more to the point, a world-class circus school that happened to be in my own city, very handy. And I learned all sorts of physical things, but what I really benefited from was the performance. And I became a different person. To cut a long story short, I can tell you, I really broke through my shyness and actually discovered the joy of just being myself with people. It turned my life around, made me much happier. But after a little while, I realized that the heart of what I was being taught was storytelling. It wasn't always called that in what I was being taught, but that's what it was. And I started to teach other people shortly after that, because it completely changed my life. So it was the process, really, of embodying that attitude towards yourself and towards other people that really makes storytelling possible, I think. I mean, some people are born with it, obviously, and that's fine. Some people have got a bit of it, but could do with a bit more. Some people just can't ever imagine communicating like that. But I help them discover that they can. So for me, that's what's most important. And of course, the old traditional stories are so full of wisdom that we need, that those are my subjects, and that's what I try to tell. But yeah, I have a love for both sides of it, and I think they're both needed.
Anyone else? Any thoughts about the social interactive process of the storytelling event? Do you love it? Are you afraid of it? Do you enjoy it? Do you like teaching it to others?
I was going to talk about just like the revival here in Spain.
Go ahead.
If you want to, I mean, discuss the other thing that you're talking about.
No, Sonia, go ahead. Tell us about Spain.
Just, it is interesting, I think, because here in Spain, we have to consider the time of the, where Franco was here for a whole period. You know, we had a dictatorship for a long time. So during the 30s, in Spain, there's a woman, her name is Elena Fortun, and she starts something at the library called The Hour, you know, the tale hour, the story hour, right? Which she brings from the US, I think, to Spain. And this is all stopped with the Civil War in 36. And then there's a whole period of silence in Spain, like 40 years of people not being able to gather and be in groups more of 4 people, because this was considered that they were, you know, conspirating against the regime. So when democracy comes in 75, then there's a whole need in the society for communicating, for speaking out, for having a voice. But it is not until someone from South America comes here, Garzón Céspedes, and he comes to Madrid and he gives a course and starts showing storytelling, and people are really amazed about in bars and something like that. And then the revival of storytelling starts happening here in Spain during the 80s. And I wanted to share with you guys that here in Spain we have the National Professional Storytelling Association. The name is AEDA, and in AEDA we have lots of articles, and there's a really interesting one on the process of professionalization of storytelling here that I invite all of you, not just you, but anyone who is watching this video, to read. It is also translated into English, so either Spanish for those of you who speak Spanish, or English. You can read it, and I think it really can give you know, some reflection if you go back to your own experience. Or at least this is what happened to me when I translated it. It is written by Pep Bruno. And it was really interesting to go through it, and it really, you know, brings you to reflect on your personal, you know, path through storytelling. Yep.
So you were talking about the professionalization of storytelling in Spain. You said something about it's about the professionalization of storytelling.
Yes, the process of this paper. What it reflects on is how this has become a trade.
Yes.
Again, here in Spain, you know, not only storytelling as a, you know, as a social event, but how this has become a trade here that people can make a living out of. And I think it is interesting to see this process, you know.
So, but what I'm hearing, Sonia, from you is that you're relating the storytelling, professional storytelling, performance storytelling to democracy and to the absence of fascism. Is that true?
I would say so. Yeah, I would say that there was a real need here, in Spain, to get people together and to hear stories and to be able to tell your experience and your story. And in fact, I did a program here in Sevilla in the marginalized areas of the city with mainly, it was women because it was adult educational centers. And even though I didn't know that I was doing storytelling at the time, which was really fun to me to think about it afterwards, we did a program with a pedagogue, and she brought the life stories as a pedagogical tool to work with these women, and we worked on it for a year and then put a performance together on a stage. And this was really interesting because at the beginning, these were people that were maybe like in their 70s. So all of them had lived either the Civil War or the post-war. And people didn't want to talk. In fact, at the beginning, they were really upset that we were going and interfering with, their normal classes, because this was used as a pedagogical tool to learn. It wasn't just, it was a really interesting process that happened there. And then when they started, talking, it was like a fountain. It was incredible how people would start just telling. And then when we put the performance together on the stage, it was so incredible because it wasn't theater the way we think of theater. It was just so incredibly connected with the audience, and people. It brought conversation afterwards, and people were really interested on what had happened, and many people were really inspired to continue with that kind of work. And I think that's really interesting that this is a way to also bring something that has been oppressing you and that you have maybe kept in silence for many years. Because I'm 48, I think, and when I grew up, we weren't told many stories because our parents and our grandparents were used to not talk, not say too much about anything. In fact, it has been really hard for me to get my own family stories. I had to really go through lots and lots of hours with my parents to have them tell me about things that had happened that they never talked about, or tales or anything. People were used to just not talk too much,
Gosh.
Ronnie, I want to ask Ronnie. Well, okay, Regina, why don't you speak, and then I want to ask Ronnie a question. Go ahead, Regina.
Okay, just quick. One of the things that there is a big thing right now of people finding their voices, and there's the Me Too movement and all of that. That it's huge. In what I have found is that traditional stories can indirectly address a lot of this, and then can evoke the personal stories that are harder to find if you just say, tell me about, some time when blah, blah happened, to come in. And I found that especially working with women in prison, a story about something that happens, and then the personal stories can come. So I just want to toss that in as a connecting thing, because right now, yes, the personal stories really are coming out because people have been silenced, and there is a threat that we'll be silenced again. So how do we keep the stories flowing, but also keep connecting to the fact that there have always been these problems and that they are reflected in those traditional stories? I gave a workshop with formerly incarcerated women, and I used the Grimm's Tale Old Rink Rank, where the princess, it's the Glass Mountain story, and she falls through and she becomes the house slave of the troll, etc. And there are trolls waiting to use us for their purposes, and we know this. And two of the women came up at the end of the workshop and said, you know, our mothers told us those stories, read us the Grimm stories. We didn't understand until now that they were actually about something and that they were about our lives. And that was so powerful.
Wow.
Okay, so there's the link between the folk tales or grandmother stories, as they're called here in India, and the personal experiences and personal experience stories. So Ronnie, what I want to ask you, your work in Patna there with I think mostly young people, I get the sense you're using it for education, but do you also, following up on what Sonia was talking about, do you also feel you're helping to help people become citizens and help people develop their identities? So is it helping them to develop a civic sense of that I am a citizen of India, I'm a citizen of the world, and you know, developing that sense of identity? Is that part of your work?
Right, Alik, to some extent you are absolutely right. I think you have mapped exactly how we had been doing it and why we had been doing it in Patna. Just to cut the story little short, I would recapitulate about our thought process. Way back in 2014, absolutely with no idea of how we would be giving it back to the society, me and my wife decided that we are very good at storytelling because we had been doing it for our child. So we said that why not start communicating with the society around us on a Saturday evening after we are free from our daily chores and after we are free from our hunky-dory activities for earning our daily bread. So we decided that we will do it on Saturday evenings. So we started sitting with people around us, and mostly the first to come were the children. Now, when we started telling stories to the children, be it the traditional ones or the stories that we pick up from the violence of our memories, we realized, in fact, what exactly we had been doing, to be very specific, we were healing ourselves. We were talking about our own wellness. As you rightly said, Eric, that are we trying to impact or are we literally trying to bring in a change to the society? To some extent it is yes, but more of it is that we are trying to impart wellness to ourselves, our thought process, our well-being, it's a kind of a healing. While everybody of us right now on the panel are very good storytellers, Tim, I'm a staunch follower of yours. We can say that we are very good at storytelling, but at the same time, probably we are missing out on a very fine note that while we impart, while we deliver, while we try to connect, there is a undercurrent which comes from the opposite direction, and that heals you, that motivates you, that relaxes you, that takes you to a world of wellness. So I just picked up that today's session would have some words on teaching, training, and healing as well. So I was very keen on listening to that aspect of your experience. If I could, I'm just longing to have that.
You're bringing up the topic of in what ways does healing actually occur in the process of storytelling? That's the question you're putting out there. Yes, well, you know, I think just letting people talk about their own experience and listening to them and letting them put it in their own words and frame it and shape it the way that they feel it. Just listening to people do that, I think, helps people, you know, it encourages people, it strengthens people to be able to do that and for people to listen to them. If someone is really depressed or just crushed, you can't do it. You can't put the pieces together and tell it in a way that there's meaning to it. So I think just the process of formulating a story, whether it's about oneself or a character one identifies, that formulation and sharing process is part of the healing. And what else? Please help me. Regina, Catherine, and others. Well, how else does storytelling involve healing?
I think we're often asked to tell with a particular theme for a particular audience. And a lot of that is a healing thing. To find a story, whether it's personal or traditional, that people who have problems can identify with it. And there's often, it tells you how to behave, how not to behave, and gives you hope for a better ending than you might have imagined.
And I'd like to say that I think the act of storytelling creates community in the moment. It's the only thing that creates community, because people have a shared experience that's a little deeper than the average social interaction. And they've all heard the same story, which provokes their thoughts and so on. But that sense of coming together and bridging the divide between people is really helpful and healing, I think. As a group, people can start to feel there's less division, that they're more in touch with each other. They've got a common language they can talk about and refer to. But for the storyteller, that act of letting down your own guard, your own barriers, and starting to relate to people in a very intimate way, honest way, and of course taking the risk that people will not like you. That's a risk all performers have. That does draw out a kind of the best of you, really. You have to trust people. You have to, your audience. You have to love your audience. You have to actually share something special with them of yourself, not just the story. It's tremendously challenging, I think, on an emotional level, and that's a good thing because it makes you a better person and makes you a little more robust, less afraid of your fears, less afraid of your weakness. And so I think storytelling is, in some places and in many times, it has been a spiritual path in itself, which of course, the whole point of a spiritual path is to make you whole and to bring you back into alignment with the deepest part of existence. So I believe storytelling can be incredibly powerful. In just general everyday casual storytelling on a social level, it can help too. But the deeper you go with it, the deeper the healing there is, I believe. It just creates that community within your own minds, not just with other people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're moving into the last 15 minutes approximately of our meeting today. So we want to hear from people we haven't heard from, beginning with Radha, and but also Krishna and Saumya and Aparna and Shuli. So just tell us anything that that has come up so far that somehow relates to your experience. Go ahead, Radha.
Yes. Yeah. In continuing with what Mr. Tim said, when he said it lets the presenter let your guard down, I really feel it's true in my case because as a teacher, I found that I was quite stiff and was very restricting my body movements and was not able to connect to children in my initial years of teaching. But then once I realized that I could become the character when I was narrating the story, if I, opened my eyes up, if I moved in a funny manner and the children laughed with me, I just found myself being so relaxed. So that really made me enjoy myself. I went well prepared for my classes. I would read up material. I would make up some songs. I would, find out some nice, interesting songs and enact them in the funniest possible way. And children would just connect to you immediately. So I found that to be such a beautiful icebreaker, I should say, in most of my classes because I handle the smaller children with a very little attention span. So stories just got them listening to me instantly after the first few years of hiccups. And I've enjoyed it ever since. So, with the kids in front of me, I am myself. And that's how I enjoy being with them all the time. So in that way, stories have really, really changed the way I look at children, the way I would want them to learn, or the way I would connect with them. That has been really a great learning and a great healing for me personally.
So you have found that stories can activate children, and they can also calm children down. And you can
yes,
as a team.
Yes, there are so many of them who apply certain things from your story and say, ma'am, but does it really work? I tried doing this and it doesn't happen. As little as a child of 6 years or 7 years. So they come back with questions. So it's not just holding their attention for that span of time, but it's allowing them to think. It's allowing them to apply, which really makes the difference. And I realized that I was having such an impact because of what I was doing. So I had to be really careful and make sure that they really understood it well and were feeling good about it just the way I did. So
that's wonderful to hear. The educators, we often say we want to teach the young people, we don't want to teach them what to think, we want to teach them how to think. But
how to think, exactly.
We often end up teaching them what to think, but it sounds like you're using storytelling to teach them how to think, ways to think, ways to ask questions.
Yes, and I'll just take maybe a little more time quickly. There have been children who would not be listening in my class. They might be drawing something. I never pull them up or stop them from doing it. And to my surprise, in a class 1 session, there was a child who had been listening to the story so carefully and reproduced it on a sheet of paper, the main characters of the story. And when I ended the story, he comes up with the paper and says, ma'am, these are the characters that came in the story. So he was with me throughout, even though he looked distracted. What more did I want? Now that would stay with him forever. And then I use that as, my trump card. I would say, okay, now there's going to be some part of the story that you might want to connect with later on, or you might want to show me that you've understood really well. So let's stay alert and find what interests you most during the session. And that has been a revelation for me, that children, even if they're engaged in something, are actually really listening so carefully and interpreting it so beautifully.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Could I just jump in?
Go ahead, Regina. Go ahead,
really
Regina, then Samia.
Yeah, I was working, I've done a lot of work in schools and often with what we would call special education. And I was with a class of seriously distressed, they were 7th grade, but they were operating on a 4th grade level or something. Anyway, and there was one little girl who had, after 2 minutes, she would have to walk around the class, and she was always permitted to do that. Very angry and, really seriously distressed child. And I had a story of one of the great stories of the world from Haiti about a little girl who is saved by her community. And this girl listened for her 2 minutes, got up and walked away and stood by the fish tank. And I continued with the story. And when I finished, the second I finished, the voice comes from the fish tank region. Is that story in a book? And I said, yes, it is. And she said, I want it. I said, I will get it to you. Because she was listening. She hurt herself.
Right. Yes.
But she could only do it by the fish tank.
Okay.
And it was important to her that it should be in a book. That gave a certain sense of authority and permanence, you think?
In a book, yes. And I got it to her.
Have it more than once with her.
Samia, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, it is very similar experiences with children. But I just wanted to share that in Bangalore, we've been, as Bangalore Storytelling Society, we've been doing storytelling for adults for the past 4 years, 4 to 5 years now. And we meet every once a month and we share stories. So we've kept it very strictly that they should be only traditional tales, not personal stories, because that should come at another space. And whatever we talk about children, it's the same, which is true for even adults. The healing which happens is both in the telling and in the listening. And we see that the change is because of a reframing. There is a change in point of view, and just by seeing somebody else's point of view, there is a lot of healing that is taking place inside yourself. And that's basically what happens, I think, when we are hearing, when we are telling and we are listening. And some wonderful experiences in terms of telling to adults we've been having. I myself have collaborated with many storytellers to create spaces to just tell folk tales, and then to create a space to just tell stories of women. And the kind of sharing that happens after that is amazing. And I think it's all quite well documented that this whole process itself is healing in totality.
Mm. It's so true.
Krishna, Aparna, Shuli.
I can go.
Go ahead, Krishna.
I've been doing storytelling with younger lot, say around 4 years to 6 years. So there's this one story I've been doing about a partition as a part of Independence Day storytelling. So when we were doing the story, we were just trying to understand how people would feel on either part of India when it was partitioned. So there was one child who got up and said, probably they should not be somebody who can come and cut up our country into two. And why don't people think about their friends? They've been neighbors, they've been friends, as a family they've been together, and how could they not trust each other and trust something else? This is what was their connect to the story. And after that, I saw these two children who have always been fighting, and they come up to me and say that we're not going to fight anymore because somebody else will come and just put us away forever. So that's part of thinking that children take home, which I felt was very good. And also about healing part, I think I've been to the session by Soumya during CSF, where we would talk, she was walking us through exercise where you imagine yourself in a train and you leave you leave your station, you leave some part of yourself somewhere. And that's really been a great exercise where I could find myself, my desires which I have left and moved on in life. And then somewhere you were dissatisfied and then you get back. I mean, I don't know whether I'm able to articulate it properly, but that's when I really felt good about storytelling and taking it for healing personal personal experiences.
Shuli? Oh, you have to unmute.
Yes, I had to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Yes. So I probably have had many of the experiences that you had already talked about, many of you. I had started storytelling since, I don't know, since I was 3, maybe. I was really into stories. I was always a story enthusiast and a listener and a teller, of course. It was, but when I started working as a professional since 2006, I also started telling stories informally and mostly telling stories on streets. So it is a form of street storytelling while you probably do something else. I was a part of a group called Street Angels in Leeds in UK, and we used to tell stories and converse with teenagers and young people. And not only from there, but from all the rest of my storytelling sessions, this is what I picked up, that stories were always there. Like all of us already know, stories were already there. But with the surge of what to say, storytelling inspirations, what happens is we are all very eager to tell our stories. We are all very eager to tell our stories even before somebody else finishes up. So you don't end up connecting with that person per se. But I think we should bring about storytelling in a form or in a format where it happens so seamlessly, like a conversation, that it actually helps you connect. That is where it should go. It should lead to storytelling as a whole, in whatever form or applications we apply it to. It should lead to that connection, because that is who we are, because we are humans, because we connect to each other. And if you don't do that, despite of like all these sessions and all, so many revivals and whatsoever, doesn't serve the purpose. That is what I have felt personally, doing all these storytelling sessions all this while. In regards to the revival, I just wanted to add a little thing. There's a very interesting thing that happens in Bengal and probably the eastern provinces of India, especially in the rural places. I do this for sure because I have been working in recent days in rural places, telling stories to children in villages. What happens is they immortalize stories of their own families or even from the village, and as a tradition they tell it during festivals and during gatherings. So which probably doesn't happen in, say for example, in a corporate scenario. It would be a good analogy would be repeating the stories of successes and failures at your corporate events. Maybe I don't know how that would help at a corporate event, but it for sure helps in village festivals and events. It's almost like remembering that time when probably there was a famine, or there was some struggle that the villagers had to go through together, but they overcame it. There are small storylets like that. I should say storylets rather. Very small pieces that people tell each other, and families tell their children. So that has always been there, and it's still there. It probably didn't need a revival. It just needs events for these storylets, stories to come up and be told. Maybe other places also could use a similar format. That was what I just wanted to add. That's all from my side.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Parna, okay, now we're going into the final round of final words, closing words from whoever would like to say. And Parna, we want to hear from you.
Okay, I'll keep this short, and I think a lot of you have already talked about things that struck me about storytelling. But what I should add is how I feel storytelling is one of the most mindful activities. It's where mindful is too cliched a word. It's truly an act where our mind is completely engaged, and what's remarkable about the activity is that what happens when the teller is telling and the listener is listening is that they both kind of get into a very singular moment. They both are so deeply singular, and it's as if they're suspended in one frame, one single frame, and it's just about being. There's really little room or bandwidth left for anything else, and therefore it's a heightened state of consciousness and a state of awareness, and that in itself is extremely joyful, blissful. Bliss is the word that Indians use traditionally for this heightened form of awareness. And I think storytelling is a great way and an easy first step towards that level of super consciousness at a community, at a shared level. And therefore, we should indulge in it, like Shuli said, as a family, as a culture, as a nation. And I think it makes a great deal of sense for all of us to really become singular in that moment and really unite. Yeah.
Perfect. And Aparna, that's something that I feel very strongly. I try to teach that myself, that sort of point of unity between people is really the kind of the goal of the storyteller, to create that magic crucible in which everything really happens. Wonderful.
And I've been gathering people together to tell epics for quite a while, and that pulls together storytellers themselves to make their own storytelling community. And the thing about aging young and old, I've been so thrilled to have people in their early 30s wanting to tell part of an epic, as well as all the way up to a 90-year-old person who showed up every time. So, you know, storytellers, you need to unite and learn from each other as well. And we all expand each other's abilities in doing so.
So I think when I've been playing around with this concept of activation, I think when our imagination gets captured and stimulated and activated, our whole being then is in a state of potentiality, because if we are involved with imagining, maybe the next thing is we want to do something. You know, it's like a child. The child might say, I want to look at it, but he really wants to touch it, and he really may want to eat it if it's edible. So I think imagination is, and activation is, you don't know where it's going to lead. Anyone else want to say any other closing words? Oh, I want to say about video conferencing. Again, of course, it's a different experience than actually being in a room with people. So it can never be a substitute for physical presence. But a lot of training and discussion and sharing on various levels is now going on through it. As Salmia mentioned, I teach a course on storytelling for healing and personality development. I'm sure many of us do things like that now. So so that's developing, but we do have to keep in mind that, as Laura Sims says, it's one wing of the bird. The other wing has to be that we also keep developing our abilities and our habits and our pleasures of being with people, you know, physically also. Anyone else want to add anything to the discussion? Go ahead, Radha.
I would like to say that it's been a real pleasure joining all of you this evening on the video conference. It's the first time I'm doing something like this, meeting people, so many storytellers, and wow, I'm really thrilled. It feels great, and I would love to be part of this kind of session more often in the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Eric, for really following up and giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Sonia, tell us something.
There we go. Well, thank you for inviting me. What can I say after Raha? How do you say it? Raha?
Radha.
Radha.
Radha, yes.
You know, so nicely said. Thank you. I just wanted to add one thing that came up to my mind about my experience telling. I am a Roma, a gypsy, okay? And when I tell stories to children, I always start gypsy stories, right? I always start asking them, if I say gypsy to you, what do you say? And then they start telling all these incredibly mean things. Okay? And then when they are done, you know, really happy about all the things they said, I say to them, well, what if I tell you that I am a gypsy? And I am going to tell you gypsy tales. And then once I finish the session, they're all like, and they enjoy the tales so much. It seems to me like this helps also to break prejudices, and which I think it's so important nowadays, because it seems like we are reviving other parts of history not too long ago. So the power of storytelling is so so important, because it really it has this intercultural thing, and I just wanted to point that out, because I was thinking about all of this once we were talking, and I'm really happy that we are here from so many places, across the world. And since we have technology, why not use it? Of course, we cannot substitute the presence, but why not use technology to bring us even closer together?
Thank you. Ronnie?
Yeah, Eric, it was a wonderful evening we had. You brought everybody together, be it on the technology platform, but we would wish to meet physically very soon, all of us. And thank you so much, everybody, for being with us. And I would request that let us stay connected, be it on FB or on the Storyteller platform or anyway. Let's stay connected always. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, if all goes well, this recording will be on YouTube very soon. And of course, we'll stay in touch. Kamala, please come in the picture if you like. Young Kamala, straight from basketball practice.
A storyteller herself.
A champion storyteller. All right, well, would anyone else like to say anything, or shall we close the meeting?
Thank you, Eric.
Salmia, go ahead. Unmute.
Unmute yourself.
Unmute? Oh, I think she just said something quick, but...
I was just saying goodbye. Thank you very much.
Okay, so with that, we'll...
I've got something to say, actually.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd love to say that I've just been so amazed by the profundity of things that people have said. You've all been wonderful, and with a real deep insight into things which I love, which is so wonderful to hear from you all. I'd like to just make a little point about the storytelling I've seen in the UK, and it sort of raises a point that's worth thinking about. I think that in the UK we've had a storytelling revival that's really been going properly since the 1980s, I guess, and it's really become more and more popular. And I was asking storytellers around here how things are going. And people were saying, yes, storytelling is becoming more and more well-known. It's more and more popular. More and more people want to come to storytelling clubs. There are more festivals happening. And I'm seeing this also elsewhere. Other countries are going through the same thing. So this is good news. Storytelling seems to be good. But I'm also hearing that storytellers find it harder to make a living. At least here, we do have a recession in this country and around a lot of Europe, so it's maybe worse here than elsewhere. I don't know, but funding for the arts is drying up. It's more difficult to make a living. So storytelling is becoming more popular, but it's harder to actually get some money for it and to make a living. And of course, if you don't earn enough money doing it, you can't spend so much time doing it. So I'm just observing that, really, but it does bring up something that as a project of mine, that I'm wanting to develop more, which is to help storytellers understand how to have an entrepreneurial mindset, really, which sees opportunities in the modern world as it is. Because I love traditional storytelling and traditional practices, and would love to help traditional storytellers and storytelling revivalists to survive. So I'm sort of developing ideas about how to help people develop that way of thinking that sees how what you love can integrate in with the modern world and actually earn some money from it. So it's just a project of mine, and I'm interested to hear whether anyone else is interested. But I do wish you all huge success, and bring that beautiful mind that you have to everyone that you meet. Thank you all for saying such wonderful things.
No, if it comes to this, we all have to grow our own vegetables.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Now I'll stop the recording, but let's stay online for a few seconds and talk to each other without the recording. Okay, the recording stops now.